And now on Radio 4, Political Animals, a series of 4 scurrilous talks given by well-known, if unreliable, Downing Street cats, relating their trials and tribulations under 4 different prime ministers. This week, an unsung heroine tries to bring peace to 2 famously warring neighbours.
So, here I am in the metropolis, and it's every bit as bad as my mammy warned. It's a vile cesspool. A revolting, sickening, nauseating dystopia of maggoty filth. And that's just Downing Street.
Sybil, Chief Master to the Cabinet Office, 2007 to 2008.
As for the morals of the local cats... Oh, allow me to translate. She's asking her companion, "Did you mate with that really hot guy, Tibby's best friend?" And her friend replies, "No, you don't want to know. Oh, I can never be part of their so-called scene. You see, I come from a part of the world where life moves at a statelier pace and mating with that really hot guy isn't encouraged. I'm an old-fashioned sort of girl, a cat of the manse. I'm a one-man pussy, and my man is Alistair. Oh, I like nothing better of an evening than to sit on his lap, extending my claws affectionately into his bony knees and seeing his eyes water appreciatively. I love Alistair, and no one else. And Alistair loves me. Well, he brought me here from my beloved Scotland because he couldn't bear to be parted from me. And then the purring had to stop. One day, Alistair tells me his neighbour is having problems with wee beasties that live in the walls, and would I mind if he shared me with him for a while? As if my sweet boy needs to ask. And given that the wee beasties are fat little urban beasties who get out of breath when they run, I'll have this problem cleared up in no time at all, and I'll soon be back with my Alistair. In the meantime, it's off round to meet the neighbour. You can cut the atmosphere with a knife. The staff scuttle about in silence, heads bowed, frightened to make eye contact. Then I come face to face with the man himself. He's called...
And now let the work of change begin.
Gordon. Gordon completely ignores me. "Take no notice," Alistair whispers. "He's in one of his sulks." Oh, goodness. If my mammy could see me now, being lent out by the second most powerful man in the land to the most powerful man in the land. It's enough to turn a girl's head. Seems that I completely misunderstood Alistair. I'm not being shared with Gordon. I'm being given to Gordon on something called extended loan. How will I survive without my darling boy? Gosh, I don't think I could cope if I didn't know he was next door. I hope I get along with Gordon. His staff tell me how friendly and inclusive he is.
I will build a government that uses all the talents.
Before dissolving into fits of helpless laughter. I suppose I'll learn to love Gordon and be like any other modern 21st century girl who flits from man to man. Gordon has this delightful little quirk. Smashing his fist into the wall when he's angry. Even his bodyguards are scared of him. One of them, Colin, his nerves are in tatters. Things got so bad that Colin contacted a bullying helpline. For a while, he's the laughing stock of his profession. Then the other Westminster bodyguards come forward with their own horror stories, and soon Colin is coordinating a counselling service for bodyguards traumatised by the politicians they work for. It's a huge success. Gordon's staff, not just his bodyguards, are so run down that they're forever coming down with some mystery ailment. Sick building syndrome, someone says. Then someone else replies,
"Yeah, the building called something off Gordon and it's terminal."
As I don't want to catch sick building syndrome off Gordon, I decide to run away. I know what you're thinking. Despite the cat's remarkable homing instinct, even the Bear Grylls of the cat world would find what I'm planning daunting. The distances alone, never mind what perils await me on such an expedition, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. And after a trek that makes the incredible journey seem like a stroll in the park, I eventually arrive back at number 11. What bliss to be back in the bosom of Alistair and his staff as they gamble contentedly in the sunlit rooms of number 11. But our time together is short. With tears welling in his eyes, my sweet Alistair tells me that it's best that I return to Gordon before he realises I'm missing. He'll interpret my desertion as a personal snub, and who knows what act of brutality that might unleash. Knowing that Gordon's brutality will most likely be unleashed upon my darling Alistair, I know what I must do, and I return to Gordon's house of pain and bondage. Colin, the bodyguard, has left and now works for a banker. Apparently, the bankers have trashed the country and now all need bodyguards. How exactly do bankers trash the country? Do they get together in gangs and roam inner city neighbourhoods torching cars? Gordon is angry. And now he's even angrier because no one gave him any credit for saving the world. In saving the world, Gordon has joined a very select band, which includes James Bond and Captain Kirk. But people are so mean-spirited that they won't acknowledge the scale of his achievement. Instead, they dig up old quotes like,
And so that we never return to the Conservative pattern of boom and bust.
and quotes where he says bankers are really great and he's always been a light-touch regulator. Oh, can't people see he really hated them and he was going to stick it to them the first opportunity he got? That's why he gave them knighthoods, to lull them into a false sense of security. Colin, the bodyguard, has dropped in to see his old Downing Street pals. He says working for bankers is so much less stressful than working for Gordon. Because having bodyguards is a new experience for bankers, they do everything he tells them. Colin says, I need to check little Tabitha's horsebox for bombs. And Daddy says, thank God you came to work for us, Colin. Gordon never once said that to Colin. And working for a banker is a job for life, Colin reckons, as they'll always be able to afford him. In fact, it's impossible for a banker to be poor.
Well done, Gordon.
Gordon has come up with a great new policy. A box for office workers who get sacked in the downturn. He's seen Americans get given this box for their personal effects when they're made redundant, and Gordon thinks British office workers should have them too. Then one of his young advisers asks,
Won't we be accused of copying the Americans again, Gordon?
but Gordon is convinced his policy will rival John Major's traffic cones hotline. That night on TV, we see redundant bank employees in Canary Wharf carrying those boxes that Gordon thought only American office workers get when sacked. With his new policy initiative in tatters, he's subsumed by a monster sulk. Then the young advisor says,
Let's do something really big, Gordon. So if you only get one term as PM, people will look back and say that was his defining legacy, that the really big thing that Gordon did. Ow.
I'm keeping my big idea back for after I win the general election, growls Gordon, and his young advisor is given a box for his personal effects. Having shown the young advisor the door, Gordon says it's undignified for a man of his years to be told by a 23-year-old how to smile and put one foot in front of another. So he's going to hire middle-aged people to do it instead. And not just any old middle-aged people. He's going to hire old enemies like Mr. Campbell and Mr. Mandelson. And he's thinking about hiring someone he hates even more than them. More than anyone else in the whole world.
Now, I know that for some of you, New Labour has been painful.
I really do hate Tony enough to pay him a huge salary, he announces. And I'll even let him choose his own hours. That's how much I hate the bastard. Gordon's tantrums are getting worse, and I run away again. After another perilous journey, I finally arrive back at number 11, to Alistair and his happy gambling team. His eyes fill with tears once more as he tells me this is no time to cross Gordon. Have patience, sweet Sybil, he soothes. One day soon, I'll come for you. And so, with a heavy heart, I return to number 10. With his box's initiative on hold, Gordon resolves to go on the offensive.
I will be strong in purpose, steadfast in will, resolute in action.
Asked what his favourite biscuit is, Gordon resolutely refuses to say. If he says digestives, he knows he'll alienate the Garibaldi vote, and vice versa. In the end, he mutters something about needing to watch his waistline. Now everyone's saying he can't even make his mind up about biscuits. So he's got to do a second interview in which he'll have to be decisive about biscuits.
Well done, Gordon.
The second biscuit interview is deemed a success. Gordon came off the fence, and it's done him the power of good. It's the first time his nipples have been erect for years, he says, and it's all thanks to the new era of decisiveness he's ushered in. Then he worries that he may have erroneously privileged chocolate biscuits and decides to do a third interview to clarify the situation. Then he decides not to. Then he decides he will. Then he decides he won't. I've just overheard Gordon plotting to replace my darling Alistair with one of the Eds. I make the perilous journey to number 11 in order to warn Alistair, but his happy gambling staff say he isn't there. Has Gordon dispatched him already? With a heavy heart, I return to number 10. Has my Alistair left me on my own with Gordon to fend for myself? How can I go on living without him? Then, raised voices from the cabinet room. Alistair's found out about Gordon's plans to replace him and is having it out with him. Alistair tells Gordon he's leaked Gordon's backstabbing plans to the press. "Try sacking me now, you bastard," he hisses. But then he sees me standing there. "I let you have my pussy, and this is how you repay me," he cries, as he storms out. I was hoping he was going to take me with him, but he doesn't. Then, a most terrible thought. Has the rift between these two great men been caused by me? Am I guilty of setting the one against the other? Am I a flighty madam, as my mammy would say? Am I responsible for bringing down the government? What happened next is all a blur. I must have had some kind of nervous collapse, because the next thing I remember is waking up here. The first thing I see is Alistair's tortured face. "I'll never forgive myself for sending you to Gordon," he sobs. I appear to be in some kind of home for distressed cats, and it isn't just me who's been rehoused. Gordon's remaining young advisors have been taken into care by social workers and placed in foster homes. Slowly, in this atmosphere of peace and calm, my will to live slowly returns.
Are you up for a gentle stroll around the grounds today, Sybil?
My time as Chief Mouser was brief, but despite that, I caught a fair number of little beasties. Meanwhile, observing the political scene from afar, I notice politicians have replaced bankers as hate figures. We're in the middle of something called an expenses scandal, and Colin the bodyguard is back in Westminster, working for an MP who's getting death threats because he claimed tuition fees for naked salsa classes. I also wasn't at number 10 for Gordon's unveiling of his big idea. The big idea he was keeping in reserve for the general election.
I agree with Nick.
But before he can implement his... Nick's big idea...
Thanks, you're just a sort of bigoted woman.
Something called Bigotgate intervenes, and he loses the election, and doesn't get to implement Nick's big idea. Nick joins the new government, but he doesn't implement his big idea either, but implements the big ideas of the Tories instead. Oh, it's all very confusing. I'm just glad I'm out of it. Alistair tells me that Gordon never replaced me. I suppose I could make a catty joke about how they couldn't find a cat desperate enough to work with Gordon, but... well, the truth is that they no longer needed a cat. Even the mice ran away from Gordon.
Tonight's political animal was played by Tracy Wiles. It was written by Tony Bagley and the director was Mark Beebe.